I'm Mike Platt. I'm the cook on the Nina. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Nina. I want you to grab a spot on the rail, gather around. I'm gonna bang my gums for about 25 minutes here talking about ship captain and crew. Now, I want everyone to understand from the outset that when you stand on the deck of this boat, you are standing on the most authentic replication of the Nina ever assembled, and marine historians agree to that fact. Back in the day when the Spanish sold a ship, there was always a sail manifest. Generally, those sail manifests would talk about the dimensions of the vessels and her riggings. Columbus so loved this little boat, he actually bought a half share in her during his lifetime. He was forced to sell it later when he went bankrupt, and when he made his sail manifest, he went into great detail about the Nina. Not just dimensions and riggings, but on down to board widths, beams, and spacings. They found that manifest in the Spanish Naval Archives, and when they did, they hit a jackpot because they had in the Admiral's own hand a written description of the Nina. They used that manifest in conjunction with other information of caravels to build this ship. This ship was built by a Portuguese family, 8 generations of shipbuilders in Brazil, using the same tools and methods they would have used in the 15th century. No electricity was used to build this boat. It was all hand-tooled. Hand saws, hand axe, hand plane, hand adzes, hand drilled, hand chiseled, and hand draw knives. All the original metal on this ship was hand forged. Took 20 men 32 months to build her. When you stand on the deck of this ship, you are standing on that 15th century Nina. This is what she was. Welcome aboard. You're going to be the crew. And I want you to understand that you're going to be the crew. There was 24 men on that first trip. All we got to do is find about 10 more, stuff them on the deck, and this is going to be your home. From the time you leave Palos, Spain, sail to the Canaries, to the Caribbean, and back for 8 months, you're going to live right up here on this deck. You're going to eat on this deck, and you're going to sleep up here on this deck. Only the captain and the first mate have quarters below in the stern. You're going to live forward of this mast out here in the open. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Rain or shine, day and night, heavy seas or soft, this is where you're going to live. Now, one of the most frequently asked questions we get is, why are these ships black? The truth is, she would not look good dressed in pink. She's black because she was covered in pine tar that you smeared on her. Pine tar. They take the sap out of a pine tree, they boil it down, and it makes a black, sticky, nasty, foul-smelling substance that you're going to apply to every portion of this ship. The hulls, the rails, the decks, the mast, even the rigging lines. That means when you handle these lines, you're going to be handling the tar, and it's going to get on your hands. And when you lean on that rail, you're going to get tar on your back. And when you sleep on this deck, you're going to be sleeping in the tar. You're going to be constantly sunburned, covered with tar, salt-chafed, and wet. Because when this ship is loaded at 100 tons, she sets 2 feet lower in the water than she does now. Ocean about that far above the deck. The water's going to be coming in underneath those scuppers on you all the time. And when salt water gets in your clothes, it's never going to dry out because the salt pulls humidity out of the air, keeping your clothes wet. You are not going on a Carnival cruise vacation, folks. This is a voyage of discovery. Now, this is a true sailing vessel, and we will open her up every time we get the chance. No one goes above to adjust the yards or let the sails in and out. It's all run off the deck by these rigging lines. She's a lot of fun to sail. When we left Menominee, we got out into Green Bay, we shut the engines off, we opened up all the sails, and these 2 big caravels raced side by side across the bay. 2 big 15th century caravels, 80 feet apart, the crew screaming insults to each other. It was a sight to behold. Now, one of the most important pieces of equipment you're going to use on this ship is the windlass, 15th century winch. You're going to use it to raise the anchor, to raise livestock off that dock by that yard, to drop it into the hole. You're going to pull the ship up to a wharf with this windlass or pull it off a sandbar. The way it works is simple. You're going to put the anchor line around the windlass, give this a pull, and that's one dog. One dog is almost 4 inches. When you've got 100 feet of line out on that anchor, it's going to take you more than an hour to raise that anchor. For that reason, these caravels carried anywhere from a dozen to 16 anchors or more on their bows. Sometimes your anchor is not going to be recovered. It's going to be snagged. So you're going to cut the line and walk away from it. Just string up a new one and go. Other times you're going to be at anchorage when a sudden storm will blow up and you're not going to have an hour or an hour and a half to raise your anchor. So you're going to cut the line and run away. You're going to cut and run. That's where it comes from. Now, in the event somebody runs this thing aground on a shallow shoal, you're going to run a line from the windlass across the deck, out the stern hawsel. You're going to unload that 1,100-pound shore boat. It's going to take you more than an hour to do it off that yard using this windlass. You're going to take an anchor away from the ship. You're going to try to find a good hard bite for that anchor, and then one dog at a time, you are going to try to drag 100 tons of ship and cargo off that bar, praying that somebody did not run aground during high tide. Or I'm going to have you down below decks throwing provisions over the side, and you ain't going to love it. Trying to lighten the boat, make her float. Now, I can grab you while you're up here on deck. Of wine, strong Portuguese wine, and water. And it ain't a ration, folks. We're going to dump the wine into the water. It's going to make it sweet, so you enjoy it more. The alcohol is going to kill the bacteria, so it won't foul as it sits in storage. Now, we don't know it at the time, but you're going to get the vitamin C out of those grapes, so you're not going to get scurvy. So you're lucky that way. No one lived below the decks. Water, wine, barrels of salt pork, salt beef, salt fish. I'm going to feed you hardtack biscuits of flour the size and the consistency of hockey pucks, and you're going to love it. Barrels of beans and rice, dried vegetables and fruits. There's wood down there for the shipwright in case he needs to make repairs under sail. Extra rope and extra sail that you're going to need. And a menagerie of barnyard animals and all the feed it takes to keep them alive for the voyage. There's horses, cows, goats, pigs, chickens, rabbits. Now, you just can't have animals roaming around below deck. So what you're going to do is you're going to hang them in a sling, suspend them from the deck beams, which means those big animals are going to arrive in the Caribbean looking something like this, swinging back and forth. Because when these ships roll, they'll get thrown up against the bulkhead, hurt themselves, maybe even break a leg. So we're going to hang them up. Right here, back in the day, there's going to be a sandbox, and that's where your cook is going to fix your meals up on deck with an open fire. I want you to imagine the hazards of an open fire on a tarred wooden ship, because that tar is highly flammable. He's going to cook right up here for you. He's going to try to give you one warm meal a day, and it ain't going to happen that often because these decks are always wet. The seas may be too rough. In that case, he's going to feed you the dried or the solid rations. That's what you get. But I know the day is going to come when you want a meal of fresh meat. So you're going to haul that animal up here on the deck, where it will be slaughtered. Slaughtered in the living room, the bedroom, the den, the breakfast nook up there. You're going to slaughter it right here, and you're going to live in it and love it. So I want you to imagine a hot day in the Caribbean. A tarred, sticky boat and tarred, sticky crew with a chicken picking party going on up here, with the feathers landing on the rigging, gathering on the rails and on your feet like fuzzy little bathroom slippers. I can tell you're loving it already. Now, the shore boat is not a life raft. It's for getting you from the ship to the shore and back. You don't even know how to swim. There's not a word in Spanish for swim. Columbus is going to write in his log on the way to the Caribbean how amazed he was to see the inhabitants moving towards the ships like fish through the water. Couldn't say swim, didn't know what it was. Now, the length of a shore boat is the beam width of the caravel that carries her, and she's going to be upside down across this hatch. That's the only shelter you're really going to have from the elements. If you are a senior crew or big and tough, you can get under that boat. Otherwise, you're going to stand in the shade of a sail, cover up with a piece of sailcloth, Luckily, you might get under that boat. When it rains, you're going to stand out here like ducks under those sails, letting that water run off those sails to wash the sweat off of your skin. That's the only way you're going to get a bath, and that's the only way you're going to get the salt out of your clothes. I am not letting you into the freshwater rations. It's not done. The original Nina was built out of Spanish oak. Pine in the masts, and those are solid masts. They are not laminated. Those are trees. This is all Brazilian. Spain and Portugal once had considerable timber resources, and they cut them all down to build their navies. That's why they look kind of denuded today. We have ballast on this ship today. Right now, the Nina's running about 75 tons. 32 tons of that 75 tons is ballast stone down on our keel. Keeps us upright from falling over in heavy seas. On that first voyage, there would not have been a lot of stone because they had so much provisions below deck they didn't need it. But later, when those big Spanish galleons follow us and they're raiding the wealth out of Mexico and South America, they're going to be carrying ballast coming over, but some of it's going over the side because they're going to be lining the keels of those big warships with tons of gold and silver that's going back to Spain because you made this trip. Now, you guys don't know anything about this. Only the captain and the navigator know what I'm about to say next. How to figure your latitude and your compass headings. They did not understand longitude. To figure east-west longitude, you got to have a good watch, a chronometer, which they did not have. But they used this quadrant to figure their latitudes, and it was real simple. They used the North Star. When you stand on the North Pole and you look straight up, you will see the North Star Polaris directly over your head. So if I was on the North Pole, sighting Polaris, looking straight up, I'd come up with 0 degrees north. As this ship moves south towards the equator, Polaris is going to fall in the sky. And so we would sight Polaris, find the angle, and that is a known latitude. Our compass is a Chinese card compass. It's a round piece of paper with a magnetic stone glued to it, 360 degrees around. It's mounted on a pin, so it's gimbaled. This is a traverse board, not a game. These are the 32 points on a compass rose, north, south, east, west, and points in between. We know our latitude by the quadrant. We know our compass heading by that Chinese card compass. We know our approximate speeds in knots. We have a half-hour glass. Every half an hour, a pin's going to go on this board. Another half an hour, another pin. Every 4 hours, our navigator is going to show up to grab this board, and he's going to enter the information off this board onto a piece of paper to make his navigation lines, his charts, and his maps. And they're more valuable than any gold you're after because it's telling you how you got to where you are, how you get back to where you want to be, and it's going to serve as a record for everyone to follow. Precious, valuable, top secret documents that men died for in those maps. Now, everyone thinks Columbus thought of this whole adventure out of his own little brain, and he did not. There was a sea captain who had a caravel get caught off the coast of Africa before a hurricane. Of course, that hurricane blew him west for days, and he landed in the Caribbean. And he spent time there mapping islands. He managed to get back to Madeira, an island, which was where Columbus was living. His father-in-law was governor of the island. When that ship landed, there was 5 crew members and a captain left alive. They'd lost all their water, their provisions were gone. They were dying of malnutrition and starvation and exhaustion. Columbus had that captain in his home, and the captain totaled the voyage, and when he died, Columbus very quietly took possession of the man's records, his logs and his maps. That's where he got the idea for this. Somebody had already been over there and he had knowledge of it. So he ran around for years to the Italians, the Dutch, the English, Spanish, the Portuguese, trying to get somebody to give him the money, and no one would. But he would never show them the logs or the maps. If he did, they would have been confiscated by the crown and he would have been put to death for owning top secret documents that should have been property of the crown. So he said nothing until he was 41 years old, when he finally told the King and Queen of Spain about it. He went in there and he tried to drive a bargain with him. He wanted 10% of all the gold. Viceroy of the new lands, governor of the new lands, the sole settler of any trade disputes in the new lands. And they said, "You're nuts. We're not giving you all that. Get out of here." But the exchequer for Spain was there, and he heard the story. And he told the king and the queen, "We're broke. This guy's asking for nothing. If he's right, the payoff is so huge, we got to try it." Columbus had already left the court. They sent a courier to chase after him, caught him on the bridge, told him to come back, and they signed a contract. That's what he got. Of course, they screwed him out of it later. They litigated it into the 16th century, the family did, trying to get what was rightfully theirs. They never did. How did they get these ships? Well, the crown told one city in Spain, "You're going to give one ship," and they gave the Santa Maria, this big lumbering pig, this old junk freighter. This other town called Palos was guilty of a smuggling infraction against the crown. They owed a fine. The crown told Palos, "You give 2 ships, we'll forget about the fine." And they gave them 2 ships, the Nina and the Pinta, old, junky, worn-out caravels. They would not give them their brand new ships. The captain of the Nina and the Pinta were brothers, the Pinzon brothers, who hated Columbus. And he hated them just as much because he was convinced they were out to steal his glory. They were convinced he was out to get them all killed on some strange, insane adventure to sail out into the open Atlantic. Amazingly, the owner of the Nina did not want to go. So bad he sabotaged his own boat twice. Once in Spain and once in the Canaries. Was found out both times. He was forced to go. Even though the captain of the Pinta, the Pinzon brother, hated Columbus so much, he put down 3 mutinies to stop the men from throwing him over the side. Especially after Columbus showed him the secret maps and convinced him there was something there. How much time we got?
20 minutes.
That much?
I slowed the tape down.
Oh, so kind. Why did it take Columbus so long to get the money? You got to understand that the Spanish crown was fighting the Moorish wars, trying to throw the Muslims out of Spain. And to do that, they were borrowing heavily from rich Spanish Jewish bankers and rich Spanish Jewish families and rich Spanish Jewish merchants. When they had finally defeated the Moors, the crown told them, "We're not paying back 1 penny, not 1 dime. And in July of 1492, they issued an edict to throw all the Jews out of Spain. 300,000 Jewish families thrown out of Spain. They lost their businesses, their homes, their wealth. They left Spain with the clothes on their backs. If they were caught practicing their religion, they were put to death. They could convert to Catholicism and avoid the Inquisition. But under the Spanish Inquisition, you could be accused of false conversion. And under a false conversion charge, the accuser, the inquisitor, and the crown would split the property 3 ways if the person was found guilty. So there's really no incentive to find people innocent. The crown grabbed everything they could. So they think that some of the crews on these early voyages may have been Jews who suddenly acquired Spanish and Portuguese names to get out of Dodge, so to speak. In fact, the crown considered this whole mission to be a suicide run, and they granted a pardon to any condemned man who would get on these ships. The captains Pinzon protested, saying that it would be difficult enough to get their men to do this, let alone sail with convicts. That's why there was only 2 convicts on board these ships. Now, a word about the seaworthiness of this vessel. On the second voyage, there were 17 ships in an armada that left Spain. When they got to the Caribbean, they hit a hurricane. And every boat sank except this little boat right here. Only this ship survived that storm. Columbus went around and he picked up all the survivors he could find. And when he was done, he had 120 men on this open deck. So I want you to imagine the cramped, unsanitary conditions, sick men who had been pulled out of the water on a ship that was not provisioned for 120 men. About 80 some odd make it back to Spain. Kind of a miracle in itself. This boat you're standing on has over 250,000 miles under her keel. That's like sailing from the Earth to the moon. She's been through the Panama Canal 10 times. They tell a story about when this ship arrived in Vancouver that the entire crew quit. They were not going back out on the open Pacific. It was just too big for them. They were scared. So the captain and the first mate were forced to find adventuresome, naive people to bring her back to Panama. Our first mate, Vic, he can tell you about a storm off of Honduras, a hurricane they ran for 4 days, where that starboard railing was buried in the water for 4 days as this ship heeled over on its side. He was stung by a jellyfish back at the tiller with water covering the decks up to his knees, and did not describe it as an adventure when it was happening. Now, a word about Columbus before we wrap this up. We all think we live important lives, and some people think they live more important lives than anyone else, but let's look at Columbus for a second. What he did, from his crazy idea and crazy adventure, he changed the world. The greatest mass migration in the history of mankind from east to west. The exploration of the entire Western Hemisphere. Founding of great nations like our own, and we honor the man with cities named after him, and colleges and towns, even a national holiday. All things Columbus, we honor the man. In Spain, he is not a hero. There is a statue for him in Barcelona, but he's an Italian. The Spanish, they don't care about an Italian, okay? He came back in chains on his fourth voyage, a prisoner, accused of incompetence and stealing from the crown. He was absolved of the charges, but he died a poor, destitute old man at the age of 54. In fact, there was no notice given of his death, no official notice, until 10 years after he died. He was a throwaway. And there was one other man on that first voyage who never got the credit he deserved. That was Captain Pinzon on the Pinta. He put down 3 mutinies to save the day. His ship was the first to discover land, and maybe you didn't know that. The Pinta was the first to discover Hispaniola, the big trade island, Haiti and Dominica, important Spanish possession for centuries in the Caribbean. Captain Pinzon on the Pinta was the first back to Spain, even beat Columbus back to Spain on this little ship, and he never got credit for any of it. They took Columbus back in chains on the fourth voyage. You know what they did for Captain Pinzon? They named a sandwich after the man, the Pinzon. That's all they got was a lousy sandwich, the Pinzon. Did you have fun? Did you learn something?
Did, absolutely.
You want to know the most hilarious part of this for me? I don't even work here. I just bought this shirt 20 minutes ago over on the Pinta and decided that I wanted to talk about, and you can do it too.
How old was Columbus when he acquired
41. Oh, he was probably 30, 31 years old. 42 was the average age, life expectancy. And when he left, he was almost 41, so technically the man was dead. He lived till he was 54.
Mike, do you have a position here?
Yes, I do. Just pulling your legs, folks. I'm a corn farmer from Cornfield County, here for the fun of the adventure.
What is your title or position?
I'm the cook. Tonight we're having eye of round roast with potatoes, green beans with mushroom sauce, and ice cream for dessert. And the true Navy tradition.